Okay. I think before I begin, I better give you some context about myself. I am an experimentalist. I'm not a theoretician. I'm not a philosopher. I am interested only in objectively verifiable information. And what I'm going to talk about now is based entirely on experimental data that has been reviewed and published in peer-reviewed journals, and it represents the best kind of thinking about the subject that we have. So I'm not speculating, I'm not theorizing, and I want to start, I guess, by asking this question: why does religion exist? Why does it exist? Now, very interestingly, we see from the archaeological data that religion dates back at least 430,000 years. In excavations in Spain, Uzbekistan, and France, sites have been found with Neanderthal that represent clearly that they had a sense of spiritual beliefs and a sense of the continuity of consciousness. Why? If you think about it, materialism, physicalism, only has been around for 459 years as of today. It begins with the Council of Trent, the 19th Ecumenical Council of the Roman Catholic Church, which was convened in Trento and Bologna, Italy, from 1545 to 1563. It was called for several reasons. One was the beginning of the Protestant Reformation movement, and the other was the fact that science as an activity was beginning to develop as a separate cultural function, Galileo's telescope being an example. And after the 25 meetings of the Roman authorities in these ecumenical meetings, they issued an edict. And they said everything that has to do with spirit, read consciousness, that's our world. Everything that has to do with physical reality, that's you in science, that's your world. But if you cross over into our world, and we can get our hands on you, we will kill you. And they did, by the thousands. And the result was that science split off from religion, and scientists, although many still maintain interests in these subjects, Newton's interest in alchemy being one example, they didn't talk about it. We have no idea why Newton believed with equal passion about gravity and alchemy. We know he must have had some sense of consciousness, but we don't know what it is. So when I look at religion as an experimentalist that dates back 430,000 years to another earlier hominid species, I ask myself why? And the answer, I think, is because religion is focused on opening to non-local consciousness. Now, what do I mean by non-local consciousness? The term, by the way, non-local consciousness, was coined in 1981 by Larry Dossey, a researcher and best-selling author and founder of the journal Explore. Non-local consciousness is that aspect of consciousness which is not physiologically based. It is not limited by space and time. We know this, and I will get into some of the experimental evidence, but I have a very limited time. In any case, if you look at religion from that perspective, what you see is that it looks like an empirical science in which, when you examine the foundations of all the religions, you put aside the dogmas and the cultural aspects, and you just look at how in every culture of humanity, across the entire course of humanity, religion developed. The answer, I think, is that religion begins when you look at its origins, because it is about opening to non-local consciousness. This aspect of consciousness which exists before you incarnate and continues after corporeal death. This eternal self, what religion in the West calls the soul. Now you in India did not have this Council of Trent problem, and so in your culture the idea of non-local consciousness still continues and thrives. But in the West it died off and is only now reawakening as the materialist paradigm begins to confront the anomalies, just as Thomas Kuhn described, that are forcing it into crisis. Now when you look at religions, I'll just give you three. Look at all the enduring religions. You see that they all begin with one individual who has a non-local consciousness experience. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, a young nobleman, goes up to Adar Kalami's ashram and gets taught how to meditate and awakens. Jesus comes from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John the Baptist, and he goes into the desert and meditates and awakens. Muhammad goes off to the sacred cave of Hira. He meditates, has an experience in which he sees the Archangel Gabriel, culturally appropriate, and he awakens. So every one of these religions awakens because an individual has a non-local consciousness experience. And if you think about the contexts and forms of religion, regardless of culture, you put aside the scriptures and the dogmas, what you find is in every culture across all of history, the same elements spontaneously appear because it is an empirical science of consciousness. For instance, let me just go through some of them. Why do we go to churches or synagogues or temples or monasteries? Why do we go to the same place to gather? What is the evidence for that? There are certainly cultural reasons, but what drives that? The answer is because we know from experimental research that acts of intentioned observation produce an informational enriching process in the non-local level that makes them more numinous. As Carl Jung said, noumena are psychic entia outside of space-time. And so when you begin to think about this, you begin to realize what we're looking at in what we call reality is actually an information phenomena of information architectures created by intentioned consciousness. Now, for instance, how do we know that this numinosity occurs? Well, in remote viewing research, and I'm one of the people that created remote viewing, we know that it is easier for a remote viewer to see Chartres Cathedral than it is a warehouse of the same physical size. Now, why is that? And the answer is because from the moment it was conceived, Chartres Cathedral has been the focus of intentioned observation by thousands, millions of people, whereas a French warehouse draws no attention at all while you drive by it. And we've done experiment after experiment like this, in which we find that whenever the target is a highly numinous target, it is easier for people who try to open to non-local consciousness to see it than if it is a target of low numinosity. Why is meditation, in those three stories of the founding of Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, why is the key thing that happens meditation? Now, yesterday, the presenters went through a lot of the physical stuff that goes on, the psychophysical activity in the brain. But I want to address another issue which doesn't get a lot of attention, and that is we know from experimental research that the ability to attain and sustain intentioned, focused awareness, however you do it, and there are many ways, is the key to opening to the non-local aspect of your consciousness. It is an aspect which is fundamental to your beingness. So it's not how you do the meditation so much as all forms of meditation, the function is to suppress the normal sensory activity of our neuroanatomy, which floods us with information. It's hot, it's cold, I'm tired, my back aches, all that sort of stuff, or all of the sort of mundane thoughts. Will my boss like me? Will the woman I'm taking out like me? Will the man I'm going out with like me? All of that stuff falls away. And you become quiet. In religion, they speak of the still small voice. What they're talking about is this non-local aspect of consciousness, which is a core part of your being. And in every religion, whether it's Hindu temples, Buddhist monasteries, Christian seminaries, Japanese martial art dojos, whatever, they all teach meditation. Why do they do that? And the answer is because, as a basis of empirical science, humans have learned that when you can attain and sustain intention-focused awareness, you can open to this part of yourself that gives you access to the eternal self. And when you do that, we know from the experimental evidence, you can get information about anything. I have watched people from around the world look at a blank piece of map from which all the colors and names have been taken away, so it's just an outline of something. They don't know where it is. And I say to them, for instance, is Cleopatra's palace located within the confines of this map? And if they say yes, I say, would you please locate it for me? And they make a little circle on the map. And where a number of people pick the same location, that's where I go and look. And that's how I found Cleopatra's palace and Mark Antony's palace and the lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. That's how I found Christopher Columbus's caravel, how I found all sorts of other things, the Brig Leander in the Bahamas. How are people able to go back thousands of years in time to get information and describe it in detail that is as fine as a 16th of an inch? Think about that. That's what freaks people out in the American government about remote viewing, because it meant there were no secrets. And that a remote viewer could look at a politician and find out, is he having an affair? Is he taking corrupt graft? Freaks people out to realize that when we open to non-local consciousness, we join with this unity of consciousness. And when we do that, we can obtain information about anything. And in fact, if you look at how people have creative moments of creative breakthroughs, or religious epiphanies, or do just remote viewings, and you ask them, what was the experience like? They all tell you the same thing. I feel I went into a state of consciousness. Thank you. I went into a state of consciousness in which I had this image of whatever, and I just knew. I don't know how I knew, but I just knew. And so in every religion on earth for all of time, back to the pre-Homo sapiens, the idea was you can make access to this part of yourself, and every religion in the world develops some technique for doing this because it is an empirical science. You have one individual who has an experience and whose beingness is so compelling that other people stop and listen to him. I had two friends, a man named Ishwar Sharma, who was the chairman of philosophy at Jaipur University, who also came to become the head of the I Am a Human Church, I think it's called. I can't think of the way it's described in Hindu. But in any case, and another woman, Margaret Burke White, a famous photographer, and both of whom got to know Gandhi. And I asked them, what was he like? I mean, he's this little man in the dhoti, and he has no money. He has no official position. How did this man get India liberation and independence without a war? The United States couldn't do it. And in fact, I can't find another example around the world. And they all said to me the same thing that Gandhi said about himself. There was just something about him that moved you and made you want to support what he was doing. And when, just before he was assassinated, the Times of India sent a reporter up to interview him, the reporter said, my editor sent me up here to ask a single question. How did you force the British to leave India without a war? You had no army, you have no money, you have no official position. How did you force them to leave and give up their most precious colonial possession? And Gandhi's answer was, it's not what we did that mattered, although that mattered. It's not what we said that mattered, although it did matter. It was the nature of our character, who we were as people, that made the British choose to leave India. Note the change in the verbs from force to choose. Religions understand that when groups of people gather together and hold common intention, they can create social change. You gather in this sacred space that becomes sacred because it is the focus of intentioned observation by hundreds or thousands or millions of people. You gather there. You make a statement of affirmation. If you're a Christian, it's the Nicene Creed. If you're a Jew, it's the Shema. I don't know what it is if you were a Hindu. I apologize for not knowing that. And then you go in, and there is a period of singing, dancing, or chanting. Now, why? Why does that happen? Andrew Newberg, a neuroscientist, asked that very question, and so they hooked people up to EEGs. And what they found as the service went on was when they sang or danced or chanted together or drummed, doesn't matter, that's all the cultural part, all their brains entrained. Everybody's brain begins to entrain. And they hold a common linked purpose. They become linked at the non-local level. And when they hold their intention, They are moved deeply, psychologically, by what they experience. And then there is a moment where in many cultures, many religions, and why does this happen all across the world, and it's always the same? There is a period where people can have, not all the people, not all the time, but some of the people, some of the time, have publicly non-local experiences. They prophesy, they heal, they speak in tongues, whatever. Because they are having a non-local consciousness experience, and that is witnessed by the group, the congregation, and that affirms the reality of what they have been doing and the power of their service. How much time? Have I used it all up?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Some
A bunch of other
remarks.
things I wanted to get into, but okay, I will quit. Anyway, I want to say one final thing. How do groups of individuals and small groups change the course of history? Here is the answer, and it's quite simple, and you can do it. Every day, you make dozens of little choices, quotidian choices, I call them, mundane, ordinary. The cat food you buy, the toothpaste you buy, the towel you buy, the shirt you buy, whatever. When you are faced with that kind of decision, always choose of the options that are available to you, to the best of your understanding at that moment, that you will choose the option that is the most compassionate, life-affirming, and fostering of well-being, and you will tell 10 of your friends that you're doing it as a discipline and invite them to join and ask 10 of their friends, and so forth and so on. The people that are in this room at this moment, if they will do this, commit to this as a discipline, can change the course of India's history to foster well-being. It is up to you. Are you prepared to stand to do this? Are you prepared to become an agent of change for well-being? Thank you.
Since yesterday, one thing, as previous speakers have commented, one thing is clear, that this whole topic of consciousness has diverse views, and very diverse views. And one thing I was thinking when I was listening to all the speakers, till now, my Buddhist friends are yet to speak, till now, consciousness has been handled from an embodied perspective. And that's where Advaita Vedanta is completely different. Consciousness is a given. Before I enter into Advaita meditative traditions, I would like to give you an idea about how consciousness is seen from the Advaita worldview. So consciousness is a given in Advaita. If nothing is there, what remains is consciousness. In fact, in Mandukya Karika, Gaudapada, he says, if you see something, then that is unreal. And hence, it's a covering on consciousness. Whatever we see, all the sensory inputs, we get 5 jnana indriya or organs of sense organs, they are essentially coverings on consciousness. So consciousness is what is there as the basis of everything. So here, consciousness, whatever discussion has been done till now, we have been discussing about the capability of awareness, capability to respond to stimuli. That is what till now has been discussed according to an Advaita Vedantin as consciousness. Advaita Vedanta says that consciousness is not any of these. It's beyond. And so yesterday I was asking that question to Professor Brophy. How do you go beyond body, beyond time, space, causation? And that is, according to Advaita Vedanta, consciousness. So, this whole debate, as somebody put it very poignantly yesterday, that if we were to talk about the ultimate consciousness, then we would not have this conference at all, because then there is nothing to talk about. So this whole debate between man and machine does not have a great significance in the Advaita worldview. Because as far as Advaita worldview is concerned, only consciousness is. So this mic, this table, this dais, everything, every brick of this building is conscious. Then you would say, oh, how is it possible? What you see is the difference, as I said, in awareness and response to stimuli. So basically, we are talking about differences in ignorance, the level of ignorance. The lesser the level of ignorance, you say that they are more conscious. But everything in this universe is conscious, and it is covered by different permutations and combinations of names and forms. This is the Advaita worldview. So that means there is an argument, might be bordering on the funny, in the Mandukya Karika again, that if you say that the space is correct, then when you dream an elephant, where is the elephant located? Because in your body there is not much space to accommodate an elephant. But when you dream, you have a lucid dream of elephant. So where is that located? That is the question. Hence, whatever you see, whatever can change in space, that means whatever has limitations, boundaries in space, that is not permanent. Whatever has boundary in time, that means it perishes over time. Like an apple you cut, it becomes black, etc. So whatever changes over time, that is also not permanent. Whatever changes because of causation, it has got some cause and that cause is removed, so that is removed, that is also not permanent. Hence, consciousness alone is permanent. Now here, what I want to tell here again, that Professor Northoff was talking about some kind of meditations. Unfortunately, for various reasons, Advaita traditions have not been studied. Meditative traditions have not been studied as other traditions have been studied. The reason is, basically Advaita practitioners, most of them are renunciates, they are monks. And there's one problem with monks, they are rebellious in nature. So if you go with all your paraphernalia and say we want to study, they say I don't care. Get out of my sight, something like that. So this is one reason why Advaitic meditative traditions, though they are millennia old, have not been studied. And so Northoff and also Professor Srinivasan, they were talking about traditions where you meditate on a particular object or a mantra, or you meditate on breathing, or you meditate on other bodily activities. Advaita meditative traditions do none of that. So here, meditation is more on a thought not as in a thought, but on a concept. That's why most of the Advaita meditative traditions are negative meditative traditions. So there's something called neti, most of you might be aware of. So I keep on eliminating that which is perishable, which is impermanent, to arrive at something which is permanent. This is a meditative tradition. And so this meditative tradition, what it is doing essentially, is it is trying to remove the layers of ignorance that have been imposed on consciousness. So if I say I have a body, I am conscious, I will say I am limiting my consciousness by this body. If I say I have mind and I am conscious, an Advaita Vedanti will say I am limiting consciousness by the mind. And it goes on like that. So The traditional worldview, Advaita worldview, is that you have 5 layers of covering over consciousness. From the gross to subtle, it is the body, it is then the prana, the vital energy or the breath, and then it is mind. Mind, of course, does not mean, it's nothing, nowhere near to the mind as we understand in the Western context. Manas, and then comes buddhi. So what is the difference between manas and buddhi? Manas has got ambitions and alternatives. So in front of you there are so many ambitions and so many alternatives, and it is buddhi which makes you decide to pick one alternative among those available. So that is buddhi. Then finally there is something called Anandamaya Kosha, that is which gives you happiness. So that is experience. Actually you don't experience, you infer it after you have deep sleep. This is the Advaita worldview. Most of you might be aware of this. But here there are different kinds of meditation. And these meditations, what do they have? So there is I'm saying that this is a psycho-spiritual exploration into consciousness, because Advaita meditations and also Advaita worldview give you a tremendous amount of resilience and also tremendous amount of capability of taking you above the mundane. So this they give, and that is portrayed in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where the question is asked by Arjuna to Krishna, Sri Krishna, how does a Sthita Prajna look? That's an illumine person, how does he behave? And what comes out from there is that there is a tremendous resilience and happiness. So a person who is rooted in Advaita worldview does not need any, this was also being referred to by Professor Gopinath yesterday, does not need anything externally, meaning externally not from one's own body also, does not need any stimuli to be happy. That person, she or he, is happy just like that. So the question, can robots or can artificial intelligence be conscious, is irrelevant to the Advaita Vedantin, because for the Advaita Vedantin, they are conscious to begin with. So there is no, so what is the difference? Now we are only talking about, as I already told, how they are responding to external stimuli. They are aware. I asked this question to Professor Brophy. Has there been any research into self-reflexivity of intelligent systems? And so he said, to his knowledge, till now nothing of that sort is happening. So this is where the difference is. We living beings are self-reflexive, and probably, arguably, human beings are the most self-reflexive. And that is where the difference comes. But conscious, everything is. And so what are the meditations? Meditations are like you have to negate these sheaths, they are called koshas or coverings of consciousness, and you negate that this is not permanent, so this is not my reality. So in Advaita meditation techniques or traditions, it is aligning your identity with a particular reality. So you understand that, oh, body is not my reality, so why am I making a huge fuss about the body? Because body keeps on changing, you get viral fever, you get corona. So then you don't bother so much about that. Mind also changes, your energy levels change throughout the day. And so this particular technique helps you not only to go on a spiritual path and attain, that is what is told by the Advaita masters, that you attain the ultimate truth, called also Brahman or Brahma, knowledge of Brahman. So you attain it by removing layers of ignorance. And then there is another meditation which is called Avasthatraya Viveka, that is, you start analyzing 3 states of sleep or waking, 3 states of awareness. Avastha, that is waking, dreaming and deep sleep. And you analyze them, and then you come to the conclusion that your true nature lies way beyond them. So here again, there is a weird kind of school of thought among some practitioners. They don't of course have any traditional backing to support them, but misreading of traditional commentaries. They think that the more deep sleep you have, the closer you are to your true personality. So they say that, in fact, there are elaborate Sanskrit commentaries on this, that the more you be in Sushupti, and some of them have wrongly understood Ramana Maharshi also. So they said, no, Sushupti you be there and you will become. That is not true, but of course there is something called conscious sleep. That means a person, by constantly meditating on these lines, can be conscious in all the three states of awareness. Most of us, some of us at least, find it difficult to be conscious even while awake. But this state is like you go into dream and you know that you are dreaming. You go into deep sleep, though the Upanishads say that you infer deep sleep, because you don't have any sensory input or output during that time. So you infer that I had good sleep because I feel happy about it. So you infer that. But there is evidence, or there are people who experience, they can witness Sushupti, which is probably a very high state of experience. Here the problem is, this experience is not using any organs of sense perception. It's called aparoksha anubhuti. It is called immediate experience. So it does not use any medium. That is how the ultimate experience, or the experience of Brahman, is distinguished from ordinary experience. So if there is any sense, including your mind, which is supposed to be the sixth sense, then that experience is flawed according to Advaita Vedanta. Then there is another type of meditation where you meditate on the truth. So these two meditations were a negative kind of meditation, where you were denying what is impermanent. You were negating impermanent. So there are some Mahavakyas, representative Mahavakyas from each of the Vedas. I am Atma Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma, Tattvamasi. These Mahavakyas, they are concepts about the unchanging reality, that is consciousness. So it has no form, no name, you cannot define it, it's beyond words, it's beyond all sensory perception and thinking about that. That kind of meditation requires that you have complete abstract kind of thinking. So people go to very high altitudes and look at the snow-clad mountains, they look at the sky or look at the ocean, and they try to, it's similar to Zen meditation on koans. So they try to go beyond the rational process and meditate on the reality which is beyond perception from sense organs. And there is another meditation which is relatively lesser known, that is called Sandhi Dhyana. This is referred to by Shankaracharya in his Laghu Vakya Vritti. As I told you, consciousness is enveloped by misreadings of consciousness. So if I say I am conscious, I am looking at all of you, so many chairs, so many lights, all this technological paraphernalia, and I think this is what I am seeing. So these are all coverings on consciousness. So the basic element which we use to cover our consciousness, hide our true nature, according to Advaita Vedanta, is desire. Desires are the basic units of covering. They transform into thoughts. Shankaracharya is very Catholic in his approach. He says, for the sake of reasoning, use Nyaya. For the sake of hermeneutics, that is to understand the meaning of Vedas, use Mimamsa. He does not agree with all these schools philosophically, but he allows the techniques to be used. Similarly, he says, for the sake of controlling the mind, use Maharishi Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So this Yoga Sutra, someone was referring to yesterday that India probably has not developed so much the training of the mind, etc. That is not true. Yoga Sutras in Yoga Sutras, Maharishi Patanjali goes into great detail on how we have to train our mind for mundane existence, day-to-day interactions with other people, other things, objects and the universe. So this desire converting into thought has been dealt with extensively by Maharishi Patanjali. And so when that happens, suppose today, like we were having with Professor Srinivasan, I was having lunch, and suddenly he reminded me that there was dessert. It completely went out of my mind because I am also a diabetic. I did not tell that to him at that time. So then it went out of my mind that there is dessert, and when we went there are double, Rasagulla is there. I, belonging from the Ramakrishna mission, have enough share of Rasagullas. So I said, no, I went for that ice cream. So whenever you desire something, like you want ice cream, or you want pizza, or you want neer dosa, whatever you want, when you desire for that, there is a thought which comes up, vritti. And that thought you're holding on to. And that is the cause of suffering. You go behind that and till that desire is. But there is a split second when you get the ice cream, and from that point till the point where you latch on to another desire, there is a very small time interval. Shankaracharya says, concentrate on that time interval. That is called sandhi. Why? Because your mind has nothing to hold on to, so the mind becomes a peephole, so to say, into your innate consciousness, which is of the nature of bliss, Ananda Swarupa. So you hold on to that interval and meditate on that. Means just observe that. If you do it over a period of time, you will understand that you will be able to do it for a longer interval. And so you get the idea which Professor Gopinath was referring to, Atmarati, Atma Rama. Means you are satisfied with doing nothing, which Ramana Maharshi used to say, Summa ire, just be yourself. So it requires a lot of practice, otherwise you will turn into a lazy person. So just be yourself, and that just be yourself comes from meditating on this interval where you are between two desires. And so here, all these on a mundane, on a very pragmatic level, practical level, all these sufferings are caused, Shankaracharya says in his introduction, masterly introduction to the Brahma Sutra commentary called Adhyasa Bhashya, he says it is caused by only two things, which are the identifications, false identifications which we make. What are the things? Considering myself to be an agent, considering myself to be the experiencer. So imagine we read in the newspaper so many people died, etc. Nothing happens. Imagine somebody close to us died. So everything goes haywire. Similarly, if we were going for lunch and I saw somebody's spectacles was down. It was not my spectacle. So we were all very happy. The professor took it and put it on the chair. But he was searching whether it is his spectacle. But if it were to be either of us, then we would have made a big spectacle of that. So why? Because there is identity. That is called kartrutva bhoktrutva. Kartrutva. You go to a restaurant, order things, etc. But when you start cooking in your home, and if you make tea, it may be only dip tea, you get suddenly some kind of pride that you have created something because you think you have created. That has got only boiling water, that's what you have created. But that kartrutva, that sense of identity, when you latch on to it, latch on to things which are not your identity, you get all kinds of suffering. So the root cause of suffering is your misidentifying yourself as the agent, as the doer, or the experiencer. So that has to be removed. How to remove? By understanding this misreading of consciousness. He says that never that which is unconscious can be treated as conscious, but that is what we do on a day-to-day basis, 24/7. So this has to be removed. If you remove this, then you will be happy. So he says, also the Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, Dvitiyat vai bhayam bhavati. The whole idea of Advaita Vedanta is that there is no other.
Sir,
It is the othering.
1 minute, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I was just wondering why nothing has come. So the othering of consciousness is the root cause of suffering. So Ditiyat vai bhayam bhavati. Fear comes because of the other, because of perceiving the other. But if you don't perceive the other, you will not have fear. Not only fear, no human emotions will perturb you, disturb you. You might have come across this incident in most saints' lives, that they are meditating in some forest, a tiger came and the tiger looked at them and they looked at that and went away. Not because the tiger suddenly turned vegan or something, it is because that person does not have any idea of duality. So when there is no idea of duality, also many people, they report that when they go in presence of this great saints, they feel great warmth of heart, love, etc. Because there is no idea of duality in that person. So on a very psychological level, and also in a world which is becoming increasingly polarized, in fact people are demanding that we become polarized, we become fundamentalist, we become divisive. I think Advaita worldview offers an option where you don't concentrate on differences, but you try to find a way to integrate the whole thing. And again, for various historical and traditional reasons, this as a practice has not been explored as much it should have been. And so I think this offers a very psychotherapeutic model also, because again and again in the Bhagavad Gita also and elsewhere it has been told that a person who follows Advaita Vedanta is rooted in one's identity and is not disturbed so much. We have the ideal of, in governance also, we have the ideal of Rajarishi, ideal of Janaka, etc. So I think venues such as these, I thank the India Foundation and also Binduji and her team for Dr. Ravindra and others here in Nimhans for having organized this wonderful conference. But I think such conferences and such discussions we need to take forward on a more systematic manner. And as someone was pointing out, that we need to devise methodological framework as it has been done in interdisciplinary study in philosophy. We have to do that in consciousness. Thank you very much.